Thank you guys for watching this video. Like and subscribe to see more videos. Let's get into the video.
38. The sound of rapid footsteps grew louder as Kakashi, his headband pulled down to cover his left eye, appeared on the scene. He was here for a purpose, one that was starting to become all too familiar. Satoru had once again failed to show up for his duties, and Kakashi wasn't about to let this slide. It had become a routine for him to track down the troublemaking subordinate, and he wasn't about to let his frustration go unnoticed. Upon arriving, Kakashi's eyes widened at the sight in front of him. There, standing in the midst of a tense encounter, was none other than Satoru Uchiha and Orochimaru, the latter of whom was considered one of the 3 legendary ninjas. The situation was far from ordinary. "Jo!" Satoru waved to Kakashi from the tree with an exaggerated greeting, his usual carefree attitude shining through despite the presence of a dangerous figure like Orochimaru. Kakashi's expression darkened, a mix of confusion and irritation. "Why are you absent again today?" Satoru casually cupped his chin, pretending to think. "Today?" He paused for dramatic effect. "I'm lost in life, so being late is not absenteeism." Kakashi blinked in disbelief, his eyes narrowing beneath his mask. Lost in life, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. What kind of excuse is that? Satoru grinned, his tone lighthearted, but his answer full of impudence. "I'm just too overwhelmed with life. Cut me some slack, Kakashi." The response only made Kakashi's eyebrow twitch, but before he could respond, Orochimaru, who had been silently watching the exchange, stepped forward. He had been observing the interaction between the two, seemingly intrigued by Satoru's nonchalance. Orochimaru's golden eyes gleamed with an unnerving excitement. "Well, it seems I've underestimated you, Satoru Uchiha." He mused, taking a step closer. "You knew what was coming, didn't you? You anticipated my plan." Satoru, who had been nonchalantly leaning against the tree, stood up fully. "I'm not interested in playing along with your games, Orochimaru. You're not fooling me." Orochimaru chuckled, his long tongue flicking out in amusement. "Is that so? A shame. You'd have been a valuable ally." But Satoru wasn't impressed. "The slippery snake won't be homeless anytime soon," he said mockingly, folding his arms. "A pathetic attempt at recruiting me." Orochimaru's smile didn't fade. He simply turned to leave, his golden eyes reflecting an unspoken understanding. "You're an interesting one, Satoru," he said over his shoulder. "I'll be watching you." Before Kakashi could fully comprehend the bizarre interaction, Orochimaru had already walked past him, brushing his shoulder without a second glance. Kakashi stood there dumbfounded. Was I just ignored? Satoru grinned, clearly enjoying the disarray.
"Jo, Kakashi.
I didn't expect you to worship Orochimaru. What's going on? Is he your new idol?" Kakashi's expression remained cold, his patience thinning. "Worship Orochimaru?" Kakashi repeated in disbelief. What kind of joke is this? But before Satoru could continue his teasing, Kakashi threw a scroll at him, his face unreadable. "That's your task for today," Kakashi said flatly. Satoru caught the scroll with ease and glanced over it with a sigh. "The usual, huh? Nothing new." He skimmed the contents before tossing it aside carelessly. "Why don't you just send me to the upper ninjas already? They have more interesting tasks." Kakashi said nothing. He had grown used to Satoru's behavior by now, but that didn't mean it didn't frustrate him. He turned, ready to leave. "I've got more important things to do," Kakashi muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "Get to work." Satoru watched him walk away with a grin. Yes, I'm getting to it. Eventually." Meanwhile, Orochimaru had returned to his lab, where his subordinates were already waiting. The masked man in front of him spoke coldly. "Danzo-sama wants the latest experimental data." Orochimaru merely snorted, his mood darkening. "It'll take a few more days," he replied, his voice filled with irritation. The masked man was insistent. "Danzo-sama wants it now." Orochimaru's patience snapped. His golden pupils narrowed, and a deadly killing intent radiated from him like a dark cloud, engulfing the room. The pressure was palpable. The masked man froze, barely able to breathe under the intense glare. Orochimaru's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Not everyone deserves my patience." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to slice through. Without another word, Orochimaru moved, and 2 screams echoed in the lab. His eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction as he withdrew his gaze from the bodies of the two subordinates who had displeased him. A wicked smile played on his lips as he turned away. Danzo. Orochimaru whispered to himself. You've been pushing your limits, trying to control something you can't even comprehend. He laughed darkly. It's time you learn what happens when you try to control the inevitable. Back in the village, Satoru glanced over the task at hand. It was a simple assignment, something he could easily delegate to his subordinates once he was promoted. Sooner or later, he thought to himself, I'll reach the rank where I can make everyone else do the hard work. As he pondered, he felt an uneasy stillness settle in the air, the weight of the future pressing down on him. The encounter with Orochimaru had been more than just a casual meeting. It had been a reminder of how complex the world around him was becoming. Whether he wanted to or not, he was a part of something much bigger than himself. 39. The news of Orochimaru's rebellion spread quickly throughout the village. Satoru had just returned from his mission, preparing to head home, when the whispers of the streets reached him. Human experiments, missing children, and rumors of Orochimaru's defection. He had gone from being one of the 3 legendary ninjas to a traitor, despised by all. Well, that guy's fast. Satoru muttered to himself, shaking his head. I should have seen this coming. Guess he had to make his move before he was really exposed. He smirked, already bored of the situation. No wonder he was in such a rush today. He leaned back against the tree and continued his thoughts. The third Hokage will never catch him, just like in the anime. Soft-hearted, always too slow to make the hard choices. Satoru stretched out his arms and yawned. It's probably for the best. He'll never stand a chance against someone like Orochimaru in a direct confrontation anyway. Satoru shook his short white hair as the pieces began to fall into place. Orochimaru's defection is almost a blessing in disguise. He mused, looking up at the sky. At least now there's a distraction from the real problem, the Uchiha massacre. Orochimaru's betrayal could draw attention away from the growing tension surrounding the Uchiha clan. It wouldn't stop the inevitable, but it would give the Uchiha some much-needed time before the inevitable purge. It's only a matter of time before the third Hokage make his move on the Uchiha. Satoru muttered, his eyes narrowing. They'll act soon enough, but for now, let's enjoy the little distractions. He picked up a string of 3 color balls from his pocket and started walking home, his mind already preparing for what was to come. At the Hokage's office, Danzo stood before Sarutobi, his voice filled with controlled malice. You love your apprentice so much. A character like him can even slip through your fingers. Sarutobi's expression soured as he met Danzo's gaze. Slipped? How could you say that? He snapped, his voice suddenly cold. For the sake of Orochimaru, you disregard the village's interests? Danzo's eyes narrowed with a sneer. You've always been too soft, Hirozen. If you had acted sooner, Orochimaru would have been under control. Now he's a threat to everything. Sarutobi remained silent for a moment, his eyes hardening. Orochimaru is gone now, he said with quiet determination. But don't mistake my compassion for weakness. Danzo stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Orochimaru knows too much. He's a liability. He must be eliminated. Sarutobi's gaze hardened. That's enough, Danzo. We will deal with it, but we will do so carefully. You need to learn restraint. Danzo's lips twisted into a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. I'm just doing what's best for Konoha. With that, the conversation ended, and the 2 men parted ways, both knowing that the days ahead would be filled with dangerous decisions. The next morning, Satoru strolled down the street, string of 3 color balls still in his mouth. He passed through crowds of villagers who were gossiping about the shocking betrayal of Orochimaru. The words floated through the air. I can't believe Orochimaru, one of the 3 ninjas, would do something like this. Someone whispered. Human experiments, it's inhumane. Another voice chimed in, echoing the growing condemnation of Orochimaru. Why would he betray the village? Someone else asked, their voice filled with confusion. The traitor must be caught quickly. A nearby villager added. Satoru couldn't help but overhear these conversations, a wry smile forming on his lips. It's interesting how fast things change. One day you're revered, and the next you're the most wanted man in the village. As he walked, he noticed the attention of the people on a specific figure, Mitarashi Enko, sitting alone on a bench, her face downcast. Hey, isn't that Mitarashi Enko? Someone whispered. Yeah, it's her. Orochimaru's apprentice, right? Another voice added. I wonder if she knew about his plans. Satoru watched from a distance. Poor girl, he thought, she's caught in the middle of all this. He approached her nonchalantly, as though he were merely passing by. Hey, what are you doing? He asked in a light-hearted tone, not missing the tears in her eyes. Mitarashi Enko looked up, recognizing him instantly. What do you want, Satoru? She snapped, her eyes red from crying. Satoru grinned, unaffected by her sharp response. Yo, you're crying? What's wrong with that? Mitarashi Enko shot him an angry glare. Why are you here? To laugh at me too? Satoru pretended to be offended. Hey, do I look like I'm idle? He said, shaking his short white hair dramatically. But I guess, since you're upset, I could do something nice. Mitarashi Enko raised an eyebrow, her irritation slowly shifting to curiosity. What are you talking about? She asked, wiping her tears away. Satoru pulled out another string of 3 color balls and handed them to her.
Here, take this.
It'll cheer you up. For a moment, Mitarashi Enko just stared at the colorful balls in her hands. Then, slowly, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. You're strange. She muttered under her breath, but the smile didn't fade. Satoru took a few steps back, his usual smirk back on his face. Well, then, take care of yourself, Red Bean. He turned and walked away, his hands in his pockets, leaving Mitarashi Enko to contemplate the strange kindness from the seemingly reckless young shinobi. As he walked off, he could hear the faintest chuckle from behind him. Maybe it wasn't so bad, he thought. Even if his days were filled with more trouble than he wanted, at least he could make a small difference where it counted. 40. 3 years had passed, and Satoru had finally made his way into the Dark Department, becoming one of its members. However, as expected, his tendency to push boundaries and jump across lines didn't sit well with everyone, especially Danzo. The older man looked at Satoru with barely contained irritation, as if the very presence of the young shinobi was a nuisance he could barely tolerate. He often wanted to sweep him out and never see him again. Aren't you uncomfortable? Kakashi asked, looking at Satoru with some confusion as they walked together toward the Hokage's office. Satoru, wearing his usual blindfold and mask, grinned. The blindfold is part of the body, he said briskly, with no hesitation in his tone. It can't go away. Why would I get rid of such a fashionable setting? Kakashi's expression remained deadpan. He had learned long ago that there was no changing Satoru's eccentric ways. Okay, hurry up, Hokage-sama has something to see us about. Kakashi urged. Satoru lazily shook his head. It won't be anything important, but look at this sun, it's perfect for a nap. Ignoring Kakashi's exasperated sigh, Satoru continued, strolling leisurely toward the Hokage's office. As they arrived, the door was already open, and the Hokage was sitting behind his desk, his face serious. You're here. The third Hokage greeted them, his eyes weary with the weight of his responsibilities. I need to discuss something important. Satoru and Kakashi exchanged glances, but both remained silent, waiting for the Hokage to explain. Orochimaru has a number of secret research facilities around the country. You know this, right? Kakashi nodded calmly. Yes. Satoru said nothing but nodded slightly, his thoughts already drifting. He had expected this to be the topic of the meeting. Orochimaru's defection had caused a ripple effect that was still being felt throughout the village. If the Hokage had been firm earlier, they might not have to deal with his legacy now. The third Hokage continued, his tone more serious now. Orochimaru destroyed some of them before leaving the village, but others remain untouched. Some of these we don't even know about. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as he processed the information.
Seems so.
At the time, we were all focused on chasing him down. There wasn't much time to deal with these places. The Hokage sighed deeply, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years of leadership. A team recently discovered one of these hidden facilities. It's not clear what it was for, but it's one of the places Orochimaru abandoned. Even after 3 years, his legacy is still causing us trouble. Kakashi remained silent, waiting for the Hokage to finish. The Hokage paused, then looked at them both seriously. I need you both to go and investigate it. We need to know what Orochimaru left behind. Satoru, though not one for showing too much emotion, felt the gravity of the situation. The mission had already been handed to them, but there was something about it that felt off. He glanced at Kakashi, who met his gaze, understanding the unspoken exchange between them. Understood. Kakashi replied first, his voice calm and composed. Satoru merely nodded, his expression neutral. He didn't share Kakashi's sense of urgency, but he knew it was a task that needed to be done. It was inevitable. Meanwhile, at the root base, the dimly lit hallways were filled with the flickering light of candles. Danzo stood at the end of the hallway, his face partially obscured by a bandage covering one of his eyes. He slowly turned to face two root members who were kneeling before him. "I've run out of pupil power in this eye," he said in a low voice, a cold edge in his words. "Go find a replacement for me." The two root members exchanged looks, one of them daring to glance up at Danzo before lowering his head again. The second member, more composed, stayed silent, waiting for Danzo's next order. Danzo lifted the bandage from his eye, revealing the Sharingan. Its chakra pulsed weakly. "I need a new, vibrant Sharingan," he murmured. "The one I have now is close to useless. A waste." The members of Root bowed their heads in response, but Danzo wasn't done yet. He turned his gaze to one of them, his voice cold and calculating. "To attack the Uchiha, we need preparation. But there's one person who might be a good fit for what I need." The first Root member raised an eyebrow, confusion flickering on his face. "Who do you mean, Danzo-sama?" Danzo's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "A boy who didn't have a family, someone who killed his best friend, a boy named Kakashi Hachiki." The second Root member's eyes widened slightly. "Kakashi?" Danzo nodded, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. "Not just him. There's another. Uchiha Satoru." The mention of Satoru's name caught the second Root member off guard. "Satoru Uchiha? What do you want with him?" he asked. Danzo's face twisted with a cruel smile. "You know why. The little brat has caused me enough trouble. His eyes, those eyes of his, I will have them." His gaze darkened, and his voice grew colder as he continued. "Satoru Uchiha. I want his eyes. They'll serve a greater purpose." As Danzo stood there, plotting, Satoru was far from knowing the dangers closing in on him. In the shadows of Konoha, forces were moving, and his future was about to take a darker turn. Though he had his own plans, not even he could foresee the whirlwind of events that would soon change everything. 41 Chapter 41. After Satoru and Kakashi left the Hokage's office, another person arrived soon after. The person who entered was none other than Danzo. He walked in slowly and asked in a deep voice, "I heard that you found Orochimaru's stronghold?" Although this question seemed directed at the Hokage, the affirmative tone suggested he already knew the answer. He had likely known about the exposure of Orochimaru's stronghold for some time. Sarutobi didn't mind his attitude. He understood that where there is light, there is also darkness. The two are inseparable, and only by acknowledging both can balance be maintained. This is the law of Konoha's survival. Sarutobi put down the pen in his hand and looked up at Danzo. "Yes, it's the research facility that Orochimaru left behind, and I've sent someone to investigate." Orochimaru, his once promising apprentice. Even after leaving, he hadn't forgotten to make trouble for him. But Sarutobi wondered why Danzo suddenly seemed concerned. "That's it." Danzo's eyes shifted slightly, and he let out a long sigh. Sarutobi, sensing his unease, asked with a concerned look, "Danzo, are you not at ease?" It was rare to see Danzo so emotionally exposed. Danzo's eyes flickered, and he shook his head as if asking the question casually. "Even though it's an abandoned research facility, what if there are still traps left behind? I wonder if the investigator can be trusted?" Sarutobi smiled. "It's two very reliable juniors. Although one is new, he has an extremely high mission success rate." Sarutobi continued. "The other is an experienced ninja. They should have no problem cooperating." "New." Danzo raised an eyebrow. "High success rate on missions." Sarutobi smiled, thinking of Satoru Uchiha, the newest member of the Shadows, who had a reputation for completing missions with impressive success. Danzo, however, thought of the time when he had considered recruiting Satoru into the Roots, but that idea had faded. As he thought of this, Danzo's face darkened, and his expression turned a steely blue. He exhaled deeply, his eyes cold and calculating. "It doesn't matter," he muttered to himself. "Soon, his eyes will belong to me." Meanwhile, Satoru and Kakashi were on their way to Orochimaru's abandoned stronghold. Dark, damp, and without light, definitely Orochimaru's style. Satoru muttered, puffing out his cheeks as he looked around in disgust. It's good I didn't listen to Orochimaru's nonsense back then. He continued. Everything's just as dirty and deceptive as I imagined. Let's go. Our mission is inside. Kakashi interrupted, cutting Satoru off before he could complain further. They reached the lab door, which was covered with a seal. 解除? Kakashi said, silently performing the hand seals for his ninjutsu. He stepped forward and reached to undo the seal. Wait a minute. Satoru's voice interrupted Kakashi again. What's wrong? Kakashi turned his head and asked, a little confused. He had teamed up with Satoru a few times, and while Satoru could be quite popular, he was also reliable when needed. Well, Satoru said with a lazy smile. This seal is like an old woman's foot trap. You never know what it'll do next. Kakashi gave a helpless glance at Satoru. He had to admit that sometimes Satoru's casual remarks were more trouble than they were worth. After a moment of thought, Kakashi took 2 steps back. He then threw a shuriken, which hit the seal and caused it to break apart. Boom! The explosion was instant, sending smoke and flames rising into the air. Kakashi looked at Satoru with a complex expression. Really? Satoru simply shrugged, unbothered. Kakashi sighed. If only Satoru had spoken up earlier. If he hadn't been so quick to try something, they wouldn't be dealing with this mess now. There is no doubt that Satoru's personality often caused more problems than it solved. Just as Kakashi was about to speak, the explosion's smoke parted, revealing someone standing nearby. Who? Kakashi's voice turned cold as he scanned the area. Long time no see, Kakashi. A masked man said from the corner. Hey. Kakashi's face showed sudden surprise. Despite the changes in the figure, now taller, Kakashi immediately recognized him. The young man who had once fought alongside him, the man he knew as A. What are you doing here? Kakashi's voice darkened. Though A was an acquaintance, Kakashi didn't let his guard down. A ninja's first rule was to doubt everything, even if it was someone they knew. I responded calmly. I'm on a mission. A mission? Kakashi frowned, pondering the words. Is he here to support me? No, that didn't make sense. A was from Danzo's faction. It was impossible for him to be here on his behalf. What was A really doing here? 42 Chapter 42. It's Danzo-sama. He also wanted to investigate Orochimaru's research facility on his own, so he sent the route. Kakashi looked up at A, who remained silent on the other side. The gaze from under the mask briefly shifted away, but he met Kakashi's eyes without saying a word. The silence lingered for a long time, and neither of them spoke. Suddenly, Kakashi's muscles tensed, and he helplessly raised his head to look at Satoru, who was pacing back and forth between him and A. What are you doing? Sometimes, Kakashi really wanted to crack open this guy's head to see what was inside. Paste? If Sasuke had heard Kakashi's thoughts at that moment, he would have definitely replied. It's not paste, it's tomato juice. Ha 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 ha, I'll see which one of you lasts longer. Satoru laughed, his attention briefly drifting away from Kakashi and A. He looked around, then paused, a curious expression on his face. So this is what Yamato looked like when he was a kid. Satoru mused aloud, noticing A's standard root mask and outfit, complete with hair as long as in the original story. Hawker's pretty cute. Kakashi's expression darkened as he glanced at Satoru, who had hidden himself behind A. A figurative tic-tac-toe seemed to form on Kakashi's forehead. You kid, give me something serious. I also have a bit of an attitude. Kakashi muttered, scratching his head in frustration. Then he turned his attention back to A. Although his strength is reasonable. Ignore him. A said dismissively, his eyes still fixed on Satoru. But is there such a person in the Dark Division? He doesn't even seem like he belongs there. He's so young. He looks like a child. Why does Danzo-sama want his eyes? A wondered, his expression showing confusion. What's the point of this? As A thought deeply, Satoru casually flicked his white, messy hair and ended his observation. Then, in an unexpected turn, Satoru spoke up. By the way, you're not the one who's come to hunt me down, are you? That guy seems to have been eyeing me for a long time. Satoru added with a chuckle. But he can't kill me, ha 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 ha. His tone was laced with a certain unfriendly edge. The pale blue eyes beneath his blindfold twinkled with mischief. Sorry, let me give you a little stimulation, he added, his smile growing wider. What's the matter? Did you think I was just going to let you off easy? Although Satoru wasn't certain whether Danzo had given the order to hunt him down, he knew this. It was Kakashi's eyes Danzo really wanted. Satoru had no intention of letting that desire go unchallenged. Since it was inevitable that he would have to face Danzo, Satoru decided to act sooner rather than later. After all, sooner or later, Kakashi would be taken, so it was better to expedite the process. His words caused Kakashi's face to suddenly darken. Satoru, noticing the change, grew serious. Don't make such jokes to your companions. Are you kidding again? Kakashi's voice became sharper. It's not funny at all. You should know better than anyone that trust is hard to come by, especially in the Dark Division. I won't let the blood of my companions be stained again. At that moment, A stood frozen, shocked by Satoru's words. Could he have noticed something? Is he that sharp? A started to feel the tension rise in his chest. But before he could fully process his thoughts, Satoru spoke again. But if it's an enemy, let's kill him. Satoru said brightly, as if the topic had changed entirely. He's just a bad-hearted old man, and he won't lose any blood if we kill him. There was a distinct aura of menace in his words. The atmosphere grew heavy in an instant. Kakashi stepped forward, his gaze growing sharper. His entire demeanor shifted to one of intense seriousness. Listen, companions are not for killing on suspicion alone. I will never let my companion die in front of me. Something felt odd to Satoru. Was Kakashi truly serious? Why was he so different today? Satoru shrugged, stroking the blindfold on his head. Well, that's a nice thing to say. Refused to accept it, but my character is the most handsome. He muttered to himself with a smirk. Meanwhile, A's heart wavered. How could someone like Kakashi-senpai ever do something like that? Could he really kill his own companions? But no, Danzo-sama wouldn't lie to him. Danzo-sama was the root of Konoha. How could he weave such a lie to deceive him? Yes, that's right. The confusion in A's eyes slowly turned back into resolve. He gave a slight nod, his posture stiffening.
I'm sorry, Kakashi-senpai.
Up to Chapter 8.